before I like kick us off too, what was the reason for wanting to do like ultra processed foods and processed foods? Like what made you want to go for this?
I think it's very important, and you can't get enough of what's going on out there in this world. And every time I turn around, it's a serious topic, but we just seems to keep ignoring it. And then you see people going to the hospital. I've been seeing a lot of people with autoimmune disease, more diabetes. So I just see it escalating. Now, again, I've been seeing more of these processed food restaurants closing down, and more of the smaller restaurants are opening up and doing better. But is that the solve for all? No, it's not. Why is it that I'm reading in the health journal that obesity is still climbing? So it's a big topic, and we seem to be addressing it in certain ways, but we're not.
Yeah,
it's not changing. And why is it not changing? Well, that's the $1 million question, or should I say $1 billion?
Well, do you think the processed foods thing kind of comes up because I think one of the big secrets that's kind of out now is that like most of your appetizers are just pre-made by Cisco. So like even though it might be something that we'll call it not as healthy, or I mean I guess because like where I get kind of confused on processing, maybe it'll help if you explain the different levels. And I think we've discussed it before, but it'd be good to kind of revisit that. Is the big difference between like an ultra processed food, like the video you sent me from Burger King, versus like processed food, which just might be when you're making food, right? Versus like what's a not processed food at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is defined by the ingredients. How fake are they? How many, you could have still 3 ingredients, but you're still deep frying it in seed oils.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a process. The frozen food is a processed food. It's not ultra processed, unless you're eating frozen pizza. So it's very hard to define which one. You have to read the back of the packages and how it's developed. When you think of ultra processed, how many ingredients are there? How many seed oils? Sometimes they're just not frying it in one seed oil. Sometimes the seed oils are mixed. So you really have to look at it. And I'm going to give you some background on that also right now.
Okay. I mean, I think we're already rolling into it. So this is kind of a good start if you're good with it. Because my first question too is even on processed meats. Like I was watching Meat Eater, for example, because I just end up watching a lot of I forget what they call. I think it's like catch, clean, and cook type videos, which is obviously hunting and fishing. And one thing they were talking about was making venison summer sausage. So the way it's kind of funny how they explain the difference when they're processing the deer, right? Because you like summer sausage, especially when I think about it, when I think of grocery store sausage, I won't say it's quite gross, but it clearly like comes off as synthetic compared to like the actual meat. So there is like that historical aspect of like, there is like a processed meat viewpoint on some foods that have been around for a really long time, but they're not necessarily bad in the same way. Because I think the thing you're hitting on that's really resonating with me is when you're swapping out like normal ingredients that were there for a reason for something that's cheaper and synthetic because it makes it have like a longer shelf life, right?
Well, again, the old saying is if you can't read the ingredients, buy it. So if you don't know what they are, don't buy that food. And bottom line, if you can just get rid of the processed foods in your diet, you're going to do well. You're going to be fine. Again, we went from 45% to 50% to 55% of people being obese, overweight in the United States. And now we're up to 60, 65%. It's growing. And we're talking about it. You see it on health news stations. You're seeing it on podcasts. You're seeing it on reels. But it's not changing. Why isn't it changing? That's I wouldn't even say the $1 million, $1 billion, or $1 trillion question. Multi-trillions. Huge companies, corporate companies, they're involved in this. And before we talk about the top 10, things not to eat, which are the obvious, and we can just go through that list real quick. And this is a topic that can just go on for weeks and weeks, and months. And we won't get down to the bottom of it. It comes down to seafood agriculture, to the meat that we're buying. Is it fake? Is it not fake? Fish glue, chicken, how chickens just seem to, over the few decades, just grew to double to triple the size. How did it grow that big? Growing up, when we'd go shopping for chicken breast, chicken meat, it was always the same size. Now you can get them random, one chicken breast at 8 ounces, 12 ounces, 1 pound, you know, depending on the types of chickens that you're buying, and you have a choice, and you see it. And they call them random chicken breasts for the restaurant industry, which a lot of them do. And they're so big, thick, and fat that when you cook them, they just automatically just dry out unless you pound them out and brine them. But even at that, it's because they're just too big. So they're gonna cook unevenly. And with all the hormones and injections and the feed that they give these chickens, that's the reason why it's so unhealthy for you. And then they're gas flushed. So as you can see, what I'm talking about, a lot of people don't understand if they're not in the industry. So when they're at home, they're trying to figure out, okay, what are you talking about? I don't understand. So, you know, to break it down, many times I've talked to people and I talk to them about processed foods, where it started. Now, it started decades ago, even before Nixon. But a lot of people think that Nixon brought the processed foods into, you know, the 70s when he got elected in 1969. But it was a misconception of what really did happen. And basically what he was trying to do, and his goal was to make affordable food, you know, reducing inflation and hunger. So that's how he got elected. He was going to the common person that couldn't afford food at that time. People were still cooking at their homes, but you started seeing the fast foods developing. And even back then, the fast foods were a lot more natural. But what ended up happening, you know, in 1971 is that, and what changed the industry was this one guy, and his name was Earl Butz, Butz, B-U-T-Z, Butz, I believe it was. So he was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, what he did is he said to America, we need to grow more. We need to produce more. So they started growing more corn, more soybeans, more wheat, larger farms. So he thought the abundance would help the United States, which people don't realize that these corporations seen that as an opportunity for cheaper foods, more corn. So when that happens, you have more corn syrup, you have more corn oil, you have dextrose, corn syrup solids, you have all this stuff, corn starch. So they started using these products in their food. So instead of using natural sugars, they started using all these substitutes now in cereals and all the foods you can find in the oils. So they were changing what they were doing and how they were making foods. And that's where processed foods really developed and kicked off higher. So it really wasn't Nixon's fault. In a sense it was, but it really wasn't if you really think about it, is that we changed the industry to grow more, and especially on the cheaper items like corn. Corn grew like crazy now. So now you get, I remember getting corn for a nickel each, 10 cents a nickel back then. And basically it changed the industry because all the corporations says, hey, now we can buy this at dirt cheap and put it into our foods and now sell it to America. And that's what changed the industry. And we've been living by that for years and years, and it gets worse and worse and worse. I don't know if that made sense to you, if you heard about that.
See, I hadn't heard about that, but it does remind me about when I learned about where tinned fish came from, because, you know, they kind of said when the economy gets, you know, when things get rough and people are having a hard time affording food, allegedly, actually, they were saying Costco noticed this. People stop buying so much chicken and they start buying more tuna fish. And the reason why I bring that up is because a while back when I was looking for some stuff, because, you know, certain fancy fish might be hard to get a hold of, an affordable way to try it is tinned fish. And it turns out like humans are always trying to figure out how to make food last longer and get more to people. So the birth of tinned fish comes from Napoleon. I don't know if you've heard this story, but Napoleon trying to find a way to feed his armies without having to rely on the areas they were conquering, you know, because there might not be enough food. I don't know what the specifics were. So I don't know if they held a competition or something, but a bunch of people tried to find ways to preserve it. And so like canned sardines and olive oil actually comes from the Napoleon army needing a way to like get, you know, shots of protein and stuff like that. And it's funny because you think about the fact that like the fish is literally preserved in oil. I know in other countries they use other stuff, but being preserved in oil, you wouldn't think it's that healthy. But now you see this big sardine craze where people are constantly eating it. It seems like over time, people keep pushing the limits, but what's really happened in the last 30 or 40 years, which is more relative, what you're saying is people figured out how to extend shelf life by swapping things out. And my understanding with the food industry is like, take protein as an example, right? Like when people started taking protein in the 80s, it was just milk byproduct from, you know, the dairy factories or whatever. And they didn't really know the long-term effects. And fortunately they were fine. But the reality is like the same with medicine, a lot of these things, we don't know the effects long-term. So when you talk about GMOs and all these other things, the intent, like you said, was like Nixon trying to feed more people, and not just Nixon, like lots of people trying to, hey, how can we make food last longer, get in more shelves and stuff like that. It seems to me like we've actually hit more of this tipping point where it's not necessarily about availability and access, because the cost of all the food's been going up. And I don't just mean in the last couple of years, I just mean in general, right? Like switching out corn syrup isn't just to make food sweeter, it's because it helps the shelf life. So it just seems like we've made it too efficient in a way, you know what I mean? Like we focus less on trying to get food to people and focus more on how to get processed food to people. So I just think it's interesting how those two things kind of like coincide, and you're like, oh, we're overdoing it now. Like there's a little bit too much of stuff we don't need.
You completely hit it on the nail, because what they did and the opportunities they seen were breakfast cereals, soft drinks that they changed, frozen dinners, cookies, snacks, fast food packaging, you know. So with all that, it added to longer shelf life, lower production costs, easier shipping, consistency in taste, and higher profit margins. Yeah. So corporations seen that, and they went after it. And what I mentioned to a lot of people nowadays is that you used to get complaints with fast food. And if you were around in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you remember going to Taco Bell and getting a taco, and it was dripping with grease. Mm-hmm. You would get a fresh hamburger patty from McDonald's, and there would be food poisoning back then with these, and they were getting sued for food poisoning, having complaints that they got food poisoning. It was always an issue. Now there's no. What's the last time you heard of a fast food restaurant giving anybody any kind of food poisoning and Taco Bell dripping with grease? Because it's not what it was back then. They changed everything, how they do it, what they're doing. I mean, honestly, how are you going to get a 39-cent taco and make it profitable back in the early 90s? So all this stuff just escalated, and they got better and better at producing and making it. And, you know, the profit margins are going up. So when you're thinking about ultra processed foods, not all frozen foods are bad for you, but when you're looking at a $5 DiGiorno pizza or these frozen pizzas, you know, I often say again and again, you're buying it at the supermarket for $5. They're making their money on it. The manufacturer is making their money on it. And there's marketing costs, there's everything. And the other thing is that we've seen a rise in the 70s and 80s was the marketing behind it. We were marketing cigarettes, marketing beer, soda, Pepsi versus Coke. They were pushing these products. They were marketing every time you turn on the TV, especially in the morning. Kids on every morning, especially Saturday and Sunday, watching their morning cartoons, and they would come up with Fruit Loops commercials and Sugar Pops and the Tony the Tiger. I don't see these commercials anymore, but that's all they promoted. They promoted ultra processed foods constantly. And this changed the world because, again, subliminal messaging is going to these kids' heads. I have to have this. I can't have any other brand. I can't buy anything else. We're not going to eat fresh eggs. We're not going to eat, fresh steak and proteins, for breakfast. We're going to go after the cereal and the juice, and everyone thinks, well, my kids are drinking juice in the morning. It's good for you. Juice is really bad for you unless you're squeezing your own fresh orange juice.
I think it's even the moderation of it. You know what I mean? Like growing up in South Florida where the Tropicana orange groves were not too far away. Like, it's funny because like we didn't have orange juice every morning because especially when I was older and I was a athlete, so I was competing a lot. Like, it's just funny because you start to think of the balance. And I think what's kind of coming back now is like too much sugar is bad. And it's not even about the corn syrup and the other stuff. It's just, I think also as Americans, we have a very warped idea of how health is, especially because I know for me growing up, it's funny you mentioned the cereals because it brought me back to like we used to cut off these tabs for some reason and have to bring them in. I forget what they were, but it had something to do with the school system and making money. And so, like, of course, you're buying more cereal because all the kids eat cereal because they want to bring in these tabs. Like we're incentivized to do so. So, like, a lot of
you're a lot younger than I am. See, for you, it was the tabs. For us, it was the free toy. Every box of cereal had a toy in it.
no, we had toys too.
Yeah, I don't remember that age, but I remember in the 70s and 80s, the first thing we did was open that box and we ran our hands, whether they were clean or dirty, through that box, searching for that toy, because that's the first thing we had to get. And, when you think about all this, the result of this, even the CDC has the numbers. They acknowledge everything that's going on. They know it. They're not blind, but it's too late to change, and they can't beat the corporations. You're not going to beat BlackRock and Walmart and Vanguard and anybody that's involved into this this food production that they're doing. So more than half of the calories consumed by Americans are from ultra processed foods, and it's even higher in children. And they changed everything from the candy bars to everything. It's not just natural chocolate anymore. So there's just so many things in it. So you're going to mix some kind of fake chocolate, and even if there's a little bit of chocolate, it's chocolate flavoring, and they're mixing it with corn syrup. So you're not even needing natural sugar. And juice, they're putting corn syrup into it, they're boiling it, they're doing all kinds of things to make it unhealthy for you. It's the worst thing for you to drink. So when you think about everything that you've seen, the marketing, it was all pushed upon us. Now, my question to you, is this going to get better? Is it going to change? Do we see a change?
I feel like I do, and it has more to do with where I live right now. Like we talked the other day, and I mentioned that I was really surprised because one of my neighbors stopped me down the street because when I walk the dog, say hi to everybody, and the guy was talking about how he was growing his own lettuce, and it wasn't just lettuce. He was growing like arugula and other stuff. He had a hydroponic system in his basement. We started talking about pizza stones. He's like, oh yeah, I make all my own bread. It's funny because he won't touch sourdough. He's like, oh, it's too much work. But like he'll sit there and take the time to like make his own bread. And as I'm talking to these other neighbors, like you start to see more of that. It's not that people are doing everything themselves, but I do feel like, and maybe this is just the older audience I'm around. Like I'm in a more retirement type area at the moment, but I do see the pendulum kind of swinging back in the other direction where, I mean, even for me, like, we'll have to talk about this after, but I got a pizza steal because it was cheaper than a pizza stone, the one that I found. It was they were getting rid of them, but I was like, oh, cool. Like I can actually make my own pizza now because I tried to make it. It was really bad. But I say that because we got pizza the other day and like one 14-inch cheap pepperoni pizza was over $20. And like that's a common occurrence in all the places I've lived. I've been to 5 different places across the country, and things are just, I don't want to say that it's just because it's expensive. It's not just the cost. It's the cost, and then the fact that if I want food that I can't make at home, I have to buy like a $40 entree to get into that range. If I buy like a $20 anything, it's literally the quality of what I could have gotten at home. So I do feel like people are swinging back in that direction. And as more and more people start doing that, I do think you're going to start to see what I'm hoping, because I want to ask you more about restaurants, is like I do expect to see quality start to kind of come back a little bit, because we are aware of certain things that we didn't know were happening, like food deserts, right? Like the first thing that comes to mind with processed food is there's people who live in areas where they have no access to fresh food. And half the food, like a lot of the grocery stores you go to, the food is also like bad. So people are going to farmers markets because they're sick of buying food that goes bad in 2 days, because it's shipped from 3 states, or it's the opposite that we've talked about. Like it lasts too long and it's too perfect, So I think that we're kind of in this awareness stage at the moment, but I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to see a lot of people kind of putting their foot down and trying to figure out like, okay, I might not be able to get completely away from processed foods, but I am going to try to minimize it because I know how bad it is for me. And also I just like the taste of fresh food.
And I think everyone does, but America has gotten lazy. And is it, and can I say lazy, or is it just that the costs are so high now that it takes 2 to work and you're commuting? So are you commuting 2 hours a day each way? Is it longer? Some people are longer. They get up at 4 in the morning just to get to work by 8, because the traffic. and that's almost every state you go to. It's highly unlikely that most people can commute just 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So that's a factor, and it's not like in the old days where you had a parent staying home and watching the kids or taking different shifts. So that's a huge factor in what's going on. And I don't want to be negative in this. I want this to progress. We need it to progress. But I don't see these big corporations saying, it's okay, we're going to take a loss at this. It's okay not to make $5 trillion this year. Let's go ahead and make $1 trillion. I don't see that happening. And here's the other thing you have to ask yourself. When you're in a very nice area, if you're in the middle of the Hamptons or the Beverly Hills or some of these nicer areas, I don't see fast food chains. Okay. When you're in the poverty areas, there's a lot more of those across the United States than anywhere else. All I do is see fast food. I see Applebee's, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's. You can drive for miles and not see a decent from scratch restaurant. When you go to the supermarket, you see more processed. When you go to Costco, you see more processed in those areas. When I go to Costco in a higher, area where people make more money, basically, I see better products. I see products I won't see anywhere else. I'm going to see the organics there because they know their market and who they're selling to. And that's the problem. I'm glad that they're working on EBT, on taking away certain processed foods like candy and sodas and stuff like that. I don't know how far they've gone with it, but it's moving and it's escalating, and that's better for those people that are on EBT. They shouldn't be eating that. They should be eating more fresh fruit and vegetables. But even nowadays, as we see, vegetables aren't always the healthiest for you. Why? Because GMOs and the pesticides and everything else is going on. But basically, what's basically happening, we need to find a way to reduce the inflammation, to lower the risk of chronic diseases, and eat as much more naturally as possible. And are we doing that? And this should be a class in school. It starts with the education. If we can educate those kids, if you could have a class, it was like almost home ec, what they used to do in the old days, which they're not doing anymore. They had wood shop and metal shop, but they also had a class on health and cooking. So if you taught kids about vegetables, how to cook them, or how to just dip them in a nice ranch dressing that you make from scratch with buttermilk instead of buying the processed stuff. But if you educated those kids and showed them how great it is to eat some grapes or a carrot stick. Most kids nowadays look at that when they're growing up, yuck, yuck, yuck. Because mom and dad were too busy to work and they get home so late, the fastest thing to do is go to McDonald's and Burger King and bring them home, and they just hear and give them their food and they sit in front of the TV and eating it. And then they go to sleep and they lay down. So the processed foods again. So it's not good. It's not good because they're on their phones and they're doing everything that they shouldn't be doing. When you eat dinner, when we were done with dinner, we got off the table and we ran outside to ride our bikes. And so we had exercise and we're eating natural foods. They're not doing that. They finish dinner, which is completely fried, from French fries, the chicken nuggets, and it's all in seed oils. And then they're laying back watching TV, playing on their phones or video games, and they're not exercising. So that is what's going on. And, I look back at the Obamas, and this is just allegedly, I don't know if there's proof or not, but I've read things on this, but I remember Michelle Obama was out there talking about eating healthier and putting healthier foods in schools. And then next, her agenda changed to being exercise more. So did some of these corporations go in there and put a stop to that? I don't know, but I noticed that the agenda changed. And it was no longer about healthier foods in schools, which we need to have. Now, again, I know the schools because I was working for corporate at one point, and the schools that taught these movie stars and had the schools that had all these students with that had money that the parents paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to go to school. They fed them healthy meals. They didn't have that junk pizza and hamburgers and French fries there. They had healthy milkshakes, smoothies, and they had healthier salads and fruit boxes and vegetable boxes, and they fed them really healthier foods. So you'd get chicken piccata and rice pilaf and good things for them to eat. When you're in a low poverty style school, it's canned corn, it's frozen burritos, frozen pizza. It's all this junk that we're feeding them, and this is how we're educating, our future.
I think
So
it even.
No, so basically, it's the parents. It starts with the schools and the parents educating the kids, but they're busy, and I can't just say that they're lazy, but they're tired. Basically, you're paying just for your gasoline and your car insurance, and you can't afford your home. You can barely afford your car nowadays. Things have gotten way out of control with pricing. And you can't just blame one administration. I don't blame the administration half the time, because every time we get a new president in office, it's blame that administration, blame that administration, blame the administration. No, it's the big corporations. Those are the ones to blame.
I think that's why the biggest impact for me growing up was learning that the companies that were in charge of the food at the schools I was going to, specifically public schools. I did do private high school, so it was a little different, but the elementary school, the middle school, even in the college that I went to, pretty much all run by companies like Aramark. In fact, it probably was just Aramark, since there's only 2 companies that even do that. So it's those for-profit companies, and I'm definitely a capitalist, but you have to start looking at things and saying, when a company owns a majority of market share, what is the result of that? And I say that because I watched a video of this guy that does historical foods, and he made the pizza that I grew up on in school, and there's nothing nutritious about that food, and I did grow up in the area where we didn't have home ec, and it wasn't just because I went to private school for high school. When I was in middle school and stuff, there was no home ec. The only class I really had that I guess was still around for other people was computer class, where you went in and you learned how to type. Outside of that, we didn't have all this extra stuff. And so I think that is the impact people are feeling, is these companies have. I think there's this. I'm not huge into understanding the full depth of economics, so I'll just explain it the best conceptually as I can. But as things scale, there's a sacrifice that has to happen, right? And so when you're talking about companies like Aramark, the ones that are serving the schools, and I'm only calling out Aramark because you see them everywhere. So the ones that are serving the schools, they're serving the prisons, all this other stuff. It's factory type stuff. And of course, they're going to do whatever the most affordable thing they can make is to keep their profit high, right? So I think that's kind of part of what happens in our system. Is it's different if there was a bunch of different companies involved and there was a little bit more competition. But to be honest, it doesn't seem like in a lot of institutions there are, right? It's one company gets the big old government contract. And because we know that prisons are privatized and there's a push to privatize schools. But I look at school lunches and say, well, it seems, I don't want to skip political on this, but I have a hard time making that jump, right? Because to your point, everything is cheaper and what's more affordable. And obviously preserved foods, canned foods, are better than getting fresh foods and stuff like that. But longer term negative effects. And I think what we're talking about too is access, right? Kids that are bringing their foods from home that are healthier. And I think when I was growing up, there was the gap was a lot closer together, right? There were kids that brought the bologna and American cheese with mustard on white bread, and then there were the kids eating peanut butter and jelly on whole wheat. You know what I mean? That was kind of the gap. But now we kind of live in this age that's completely. In fact, it was even so bad at the schools. If you ran out of money, even if your parents had money or whatever, but you didn't have money that day, the school would give you a frozen PB&J and a crappy enriched white bread hamburger bun, something you could throw against the wall, was still frozen, So I do think, to your point, that a lot of people not only have grown up in this environment where this gap of access is growing, but it's become a lot more noticeable now, because with technology and everything, they found ways to become a lot more profitable and replace out all these foods. And the reality, if you want to turn it around, you got to invest in the people in your country, or kind of in your, I guess even as corporations. Because I think my answer for my opinion for where you're talking about with corporations is the reason why they're getting away with that is because there's no pushback, right? People who don't have access don't have a choice, but you do really vote with your dollar, not them, but the people that do have access to both. You vote for your dollar based on that convenience. That's what
you ask yourself, Jake, are they paying off the lobbyists? They're paying people off. You know, who's getting paid not to do this? The advertising, the marketing, are they getting? And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but who benefits from all this? Corporations that develop all this food. And when you think about it, BlackRock has a certain percentage of Coke, a certain percentage of Pepsi, Frito-Lay. They have percentages of all these companies. And then who else benefits? Big Pharma. Because every time somebody gets sick and a new disease, Crohn's disease, something happens because of the inflammation, because the high amounts of sugar in your blood and everything else. And you have heart problems and your veins get clogged. Anything that happens, you need a pill for it. And maybe it's 3 pills or 5 pills, and you're on it for life now. And then you're going to the hospital because, you know, you need oxygen. You need to get your blood is poisoned now, so you got to get filtered out. There's so many different diseases that we can't even start to count. And it just more and more you hear people having this. And again, where does it start? Where does it end? So I don't see it ending. And yes, I have noticed a shift in people wanting to eat better foods, going out at restaurants that are made from scratch. But here's the other thing I'm seeing in restaurants too: whole foods, whole proteins. If you're going to go to a high-end steakhouse, yes, you're going to get a whole piece of ribeye steak in New York or filet or something like that, a rack of lamb, but you're going to pay $125 to $80 for it. But most restaurants now, it's mixed noodles, mixed vegetables with pieces of chicken, pieces of beef, because they're trying to stretch that food cost out for you and make it more affordable for you so that you can dine out. So you're not really getting the nutrition. People are just thinking, well, if I eat vegetables, I'm healthier. No. You need a certain amount of protein. Let's just say 170 grams per day. You have to have protein in your diet. And unfortunately, where beef gets a bad rap, it has the highest amount of protein, more protein than fish, chicken, and turkey. And you have to make sure that turkey isn't filled with nitrates and the chicken isn't filled with hormones and everything else. So, you know, I don't see us getting better. And when are we going to make that change? Well, when the government puts up regulations that stop these big corporations. But in the end, the big corporations, I believe, have more power than our government.
I think that'll be kind of the path that we see already happening, right? Is like corporations have, the general feeling is corporations have a little too much input. And I say that because my favorite thing to make fun of that you brought up is Olive Garden's Alfredo. Not even chicken Alfredo, just regular Alfredo. $19 bowl of pasta. And like, I've literally talked to people in the restaurant industry. I can't remember, you might have been one of them that brought this up too, but there was someone in my family or something I was talking about, and they're like, Alfredo's like the easiest thing to make. Like, it's just a little cream cheese. Like, they were talking about how like literally you're paying like $18, $19 for something that probably cost them it takes 5 minutes to make, and you're using like $3 of ingredients, and they're charging a premium. And I think that's the compounding that happens over time. Is like, I know that's where I'm at, is like, there's nothing that pisses me off more than going to a restaurant and paying $20 for something I feel like I could have made at home. Like, that's been the big drive. And I know I'm not the only one. Maybe it's the bubble I'm in. Like, I have friends that are saying the same thing. I know we talk about that, where it's like, I'm not going to go to a restaurant. Like, you know who else I'm going to pick on? Miller's. Like, my fiance, I should say, she loves Miller's, right? But she always gets the cheese fries. And every time they come out, I'm so mad because it's like $16 for this thing of cheese fries that looks like something I literally like. There's your fries. Sprinkle on the shredded cheese and a little bit of bacon bits. Like, there's nothing fancy about it. I mean, to your point, it's just convenience. And that's why I think that there will be this effect that this effect that happens where it will, I don't know how it'll happen, but I think it'll impact a lot of these companies' bottom lines, and it'll pull people back in because, we've already done the scale up to these national companies. But the problem is in the pursuit of maximizing profit, they've made a lot of quality mistakes. So I think that we're going to start moving more toward, not that it'll completely go away, but I think you'll start to see a lot of those strangleholds loosen up. And what's more likely to happen is those big corporations, we already see this happening where they're offering better solutions. Like, I worked with a client that sold vending machines, and he literally was getting healthy vending machines because obviously it's a convenience thing, right? Like, there's nothing in a vending machine that you would be excited to get and it's all usually processed, but it's like, okay, these are healthier options, better options you get. So people are already making that swing. I just feel like it's really, really slow, but it is gaining momentum because to your point, people are having these health problems, or they're trying to decide. And I think this is a great question to ask you. Is like, especially in a restaurant, is it cheaper to buy good quality ingredients and make good food? Like maybe not cheaper is not the right word. Do you get more bang for your buck when you use whole foods and make a healthier meal, like with more whole foods? Or do you get more bang for your buck when you just buy those cheap ingredients and make that meal? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, it's very transparent. I mean, to buy whole protein at something that goes 4 or 5, and some of the beef $15 a pound, some of the crab meat and seafood goes to $30 a pound. So when you look at that, and then to find the labor, and you have to find qualified labor at that. If you do, you have to pay them. So right now with gas prices rising and not going down, and to be honest with you, I know they went down a little bit, but during COVID they were just as high. So are they going to make those changes? I mean, when I look at crude oil back in 22, it was all the way up to $1.16 a barrel. Right now, even with this war going on, I think it was up to the other day $79 a barrel. So why is it higher than it was before?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it should still be down low. We shouldn't be paying these gas prices. Why hasn't it changed? So even when it went down to $70 a barrel, gas prices barely went down 20, 30 cents. And here we are, you know, what is it? 4 years later, 5 years later, when you think about it, and prices aren't going down, and everyone's fighting for higher wages. And, you know, and when you think about the higher wages, yes, everyone deserves to make an affordable wage. That's not what I'm saying here. But every time you're increasing it to 20 to 25 to $30 an hour, and these are some of these larger states, you know, like California and Texas and Chicago. So when you see that, that is the problem, because it's not just the product cost of that. Then you have paper. It's made with petroleum. So you're looking at gasoline. So packaging goes up. And then so you have all these things that are happening. So you're not going to give somebody $25, $30 an hour and then reduce their labor costs, because you can't. Once you give it to them, you can't take it back. Then insurance companies are involved. Taxes are involved. So the state raises taxes. So that's what I'm saying. How is this going to balance out? How are we going to make these changes? So processed food just keeps coming back. And that's where it relates to, because whole proteins are way too much. So when I cost out a meal with a whole protein, and you say, okay, I'm going to be giving them 8 ounces of protein, 8 ounce chicken breast, 8 ounces of a porterhouse pork chop, whatever it is. I mean, I'm looking at, with vegetables, sauce, and sides, I'm still looking at an average of $5, $8, $10, depending on the entree. And it used to be the old saying, you times that times 3 and you're perfect in your product cost. Not no more. You have to times it times 6, 7, or 8, because you have your lease, you have a triple net, you have all of these costs involved, directs, and all these employees going in. And your insurance, your workman's comp rates just keep climbing. So when you look at it, that's why they're doing these stir fries and these burritos and these tacos, because that's how they make money. Because I used to go and you would buy cheap meats like top sirloin and carne asada for, you know, $1.67 a pound. In the 90s, salmon was $2.75 a pound, $2.95 a pound for great salmon, Norwegian, Russian salmon, wherever we got it from, Atlantic. And now you're at $8, $9, $10, $12, $15 a pound, depending on where you're going and where you're buying it from, whether it's wholesale in Costco or wherever else. So these are the things that we're looking at, and how we produce and how we're moving forward. And that's what makes it almost impossible, where these processed food companies have your backs up against the wall, and people want to eat healthier. And they're working more hours or driving more hours, and they're just like, I'm starving. I got to pick up something quick. And they can't go out to eat for $80 a person every single day. They can't afford it, because they're putting that into the gasoline every 2 or 3 days, $80. So that's where we're stuck at, and how we're going to make this change. And we have to look, okay, eat this, not that, and make sure it's good for you. And when you thought about it in the old days, again, when you bring up the old past, you'd go to the bodegas, you'd go to you'd have these farmers markets all the time on the street. They always sold fresh bread, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables when you went in there. They didn't have all the candy bars and chips. When I was growing up, Doritos and Coca-Cola, we looked at that guy that brought them in his lunch sack and we said, wow, that guy must be rich. Because we got the Granny Goose and the Springfield. Someone asked a question about this the other day, and I was like, this is how life was back in the 70s and 80s. Because we got the off brands, because we knew that soda cost 9 cents or 11 cents, and that bag of chips was 10 cents. And we knew that Coke cost double, and so did Doritos. And we're like, wow, I wish I could have Doritos. And nowadays it's very common in the household. Those off-brand chips and sodas do not exist anymore. Nobody else buys them. So basically, these corporations cornered the market and got rid of all those smaller companies. And that's exactly what they do. They eat them up. They buy them out. So that's where we're at. And this is what we need to address. And I wish they addressed this more, in the schools, in the households, and figured a way out. What can you pick up on the way home? Which I used to love was the dairies, and I thought of the upgraded dairy, because it was a drive-through and you park there and the guy would come out and you get a gallon of milk, a gallon of ice cream. And for those guys that could drink and drive back in the 70s, they would grab a 6-pack of beer on the way home. And, you would get whatever you needed to get, and you could buy a few vegetables. And I was thinking of an upgraded one where you can get with one without, in plastic bags and covered all day, whether it's a pre-made meal, roasted chicken, something that's healthier so you can take home. That's considered fast food. So these are the things that we have to look at. What's the next way? I thought of a market called Outtakes, where you walk in and all the food is pre-grilled, pre-cooked, probably about 90% of the way. You just take it home and put it in your oven. You want to put it in your microwave. I'm against the microwave because I don't like radiation on my food. But again, the vegetables are blanched off. The mashed potatoes are there. You have the rice peel off. You can choose, and you walk right in. And it's not a big supermarket. This would be kind of like a fast food joint, no drive-through. You walk in, soups are pre-made, put it in a cup. Your salad's up against this wall, healthy beverages, and you could have everything you wanted. Grilled chicken, grilled salmon, grilled steaks. They box it up, you take it home, you throw it in the oven for 5 minutes, you pull it out, and you feed your family. These are ways of us progressing and getting rid of the fast food chains.
So one thing I think conceptually that will likely happen is what's really happening on the market. Because when you have me thinking about all the different ways where one thing that's true is I'm 35 and I'm a millennial, right? Like I grew up eating healthy and a lot of stuff like that. Like my parents made sure we were really on that stuff. And as we got older, there is more access to bad foods. But the thing is, we have more access to a lot of things. And the way I would kind of describe it is imagine that you have to buy a desk. And instead of buying a full complete desk or having 3 desks to choose from, they realize that a better way to make money is to sell you the desk in pieces and give you 3 different options and 3 different tiers of the desk. Because no matter what, they'll make more money selling the desk in these customizable pieces than they do if they just sell you a single desk, right? Like I'm just thinking about the fact that like when we travel, we're traveling with a microwave oven. There's a microwave where we're going. There's an oven where we're going, but then there's also the toaster and like all the different appliances and all the different kinds of foods and all the different, like we have more access to stuff than we ever had before. But it's like, instead of just buying one thing, the genius thing a lot of big companies have done, not just big companies, just the market in general has done, it's found a way to charge for everything. And I say that because I'm also very grumpy about the fact that like when I was very broke, I ate things like beef heart, you know what I mean? Because it was cheap, it tasted good. Beef heart was like $2-3. Like we looked the other day at the store, that's $9. If you want oxtails, like I mean, I think we talked about that, oxtails and things like tongue and tripe, like some of the awful type stuff is it used to be like the really cheap cuts of meat that you could get, but now it's when you go to the store, it's actually really expensive. They found a way to charge for like every single piece of the animal now, and like a premium on it. And so I think one of the things, or I hope one of the things that'll happen, and you kind of see, there's rumors it's happening with the younger generation where they're detaching from the internet and they're trying to do more stuff offline. I think we are going to move back into the age where people do want to cook more for themselves, and we're all realizing like the effects this is having on our body of, because even when you have all these cooked foods, what you were talking about just reminded me, like grocery stores have become really, really good at offering all this pre-made stuff. but the pre-made stuff isn't really solving the problem either, you know? So I think part of what that really comes down to is us finding ways to find that balance between like the convenience of pre-made food that we can eat and not have long-term bad effects, but also like going back to making food at home. Like that's something I think I'm personally doing, and a lot of my friends who have young families are doing, like going back to trying to get those raw ingredients and cook at home. And it's not really necessarily just to avoid processed foods. It's because it's cheaper, right? Like if I buy, doesn't even have to be organic, just regular vegetables, and I make a meal that has a decent amount of fiber and protein, like I'm going to be more full than if I make myself even a pizza at home, right? Things that are high carb, high fat, stuff that you usually get at a restaurant, right? Like the restaurants are great because they taste good and the food is rich, but like to your point, they're not usually high in protein, they're not high in fiber, you're not feeling as full. So I think that might be one of the things too, is because like, you know, technology has been weaponized in a way to take advantage of you on every single penny. And I think people are starting to take that step back. That's the whole thing about coming back home and trying to make food. And it's not even about the budget. It's just the fact that like, oh, I feel like crap when I get Costco chicken. You know what I mean? Like you can say what you want about Costco chicken, good or bad, but at the end of the day, like the pre-cooked chicken isn't as good if I just even take like a GMO chicken and bring it home and cook it. You know, like I'm more full and I don't have to eat as much when I'm eating the right things. And I think I hope to see more of the movement, because that's what I'm doing for myself. And I know other people that are in the position I am have a desk job, you know, like my big focus on my diet right now is protein and fiber, because those are the things that help me balance my cholesterol. They help with all the things I have problems with when I don't exercise.
But you know what, and you bring something up about the desk has nothing to do with food, but I understand what you're saying. But when you shop for that desk, you're not educated. The average person not educated on it. You don't know if you're getting cedar or oak, which are probably better woods to have. And just for example, IKEA found a way. IKEA was the fast food industry of affordable furniture, especially if you're going away to college or you just got your first place and you can't afford it. They give you the cheapest wood. Half the times when you put it together, the instructions were so bad. But when you did put it together, within a week or two, it fell apart. The screws would get worn out, and the wood would start to chip away, so it wouldn't be so tight for you. So, you know, and that brings back to what you're talking about, what you're eating in the takeout food. So, you know, let's look at the top 10 that we should not be eating. And one of the things that you're talking about, so if I'm going to these supermarkets and they have pre-made food, what is the number one thing that you're buying? You're buying sandwiches in a container, or you're going to get deli meats. And that is something, when you look at pepperoni, bologna, you know, hot dogs as a processed foods. Hot dogs is one of the worst things for you. And why is it so bad for you? Think about it. High in sodium, preservatives are in it, and nitrates. And again, nitrates are the curing salt for you. And I mentioned this plenty of times. When I was at culinary school, we had this thing, pink salt. It was a nitrate, and they called it Celrose. And they said you only put a couple tablespoons for every 100 pounds. But if you ate that, you die instantly. So it's these things that we're eating and putting into our body. Just when you think, well, I'm eating a sandwich, it's more natural, and it's not a fried hamburger or French fries or a fried chicken sandwich or chicken tenders. It still has stuff that gives you high inflammation into your body, into your organs. And that's why you see people stomachs grow out here and it doesn't deflate. And you can't figure out why. I haven't been eating fried foods at all. And I don't eat the bread, I just eat the meat. Well, consider what you're eating. So, and then they grab a sugary drink and say, I'm drinking Diet Coke, I'm drinking Coke Zero. Again, high amounts of fructose. You have to find things that are organic, that have natural sugars. Read the back of the can. Again, just large amounts of sugar. When you look at how much sugar is in a can of Coke, soda, any of those, there's almost no nutritional value to it. So why are you drinking it? And they don't just drink one; they grab two. And you know, for years it was the big gulp, the 32 ounces, and everybody want, and they get big. And every time you go to the store, you go to a fast food joint, would you like to supersize that? Would you like a larger one for 10 cents more? And that's where the hook was. And that's why you see obesity growing and growing, because everyone's like, why? Yeah, I could use a little extra. I can have extra. I want to drink more. So for 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents more, it's nothing. Let me get bigger fries too. So they're pushing us to eat more when you should be portioning out your food. So portion control is big, but when you go to fast food, I'm going to get that big giant 1.5 pound, 2 pound burrito. And then you go to Chipotle. Yes, add more sour cream, add more cheese, add more meat, add more beans, add more rice. And you're thinking, well, it's fresh. It's healthier for me. It has fresh tomatoes and corn. It's like what you're eating is not good for you. You're overeating, and there is still processed foods in that, even though they're trying to sell it to you as fresh and natural. Again, let's go down to the package.
Well, if I could just jump in real quick, because I think something you're also pointing out too is when you travel abroad, you see people, like we talked about, maybe eating things, because like one of my favorite foods to eat is mortadella, right? Which is just a fancy way to call it. It's just European bologna, right? But what's really funny is when I've heard people make the comparison too. It's like, well, in other countries, they drink soda or they eat this. And what's really funny is I think the biggest thing that we actually don't pay attention to is exactly what you said. It's all volume. Like the thing about Americans is like we eat with our brains. And if you want proof of that, complete side topic, but I was listening to a video on Ozempic, and they were talking about how there are things that haven't been tested for Ozempic. So it's really just focused on things like diabetes. Well, one of the things that it does for a lot of people is it turns off the food noise. So what's funny about a lot of this stuff too is that it's made so you can eat a lot of it. And you can say that it's the addiction or whatever, but really it's just that fact of like, we do need to keep in mind with these foods, there's the psychological aspect of people eat when they're bored, like, and all these other things. Because like I said, when I've been in other countries, I had like a Coke or a Fanta every day in Italy. And I was eating lots of stuff that I technically shouldn't be able to eat. But like the processed meat, for example, has bacteria on it that helps you digest that, like, because our food is so sanitized. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like it minimizes the health issues when they sanitize things like certain types of meats. But I just want to throw out the thing that I think that the biggest thing with all this stuff that we do need to keep in mind with every item is that it's made in a way that so you can eat a lot of them. So like, that's why people think we eat too much. It's because it's a lot of empty foods. You don't feel full when you eat this, because, I could eat a sub and a soda like every day and it'd be like I almost ate nothing. It's not good.
I feel like in the United States, we cattle feed. We just fill people up with grain and fill them up. And later on, 2 hours later, like, wow, I'm hungry. So yeah. Again, you brought up, Europe and everything. So when you go to Italy, it's their deli meats are more naturally made, and they're hanging from a ceiling, and those things are naturally cured. It's not like the same deli meats that we have out here. What they do out here, what people don't understand with hams and turkeys, and when you go to these delis, not only do they brine the meats, okay, in the nitrates and sugar and high amounts of sodium, but they lard them. So they inject them with lard, inject them with fat. That's why they're juicy. And you can taste some that just taste horrible, tastes so fake. So, we have to get off that, because, I mean, when you think about it, the Italians in New York, they're eating the gabagool and the salamis and the mortadella, and they'll just take it out of the package and eat it. But you could see how big they get. When you go to Italy, you see how slender they are, and they're eating the same thing. So it's really not the same thing, though. It's made differently, and that's what we have to go to. So number 3 for me on here is the packaged pastries and donuts, commercial muffins. Again, refined flour, seed oils, preservatives in those. We have to have a long shelf life. In the old days, I would see something, and within a couple of days, 3, 4, 5 days, you would see the mold growing on it, even the breads. Now you'll see some of this stuff just lasting 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's almost like there's no shelf life. When did it really come in? Even it's something that you don't want to eat. The preservatives in it, if they put the cheese or the raspberry filling, strawberry filling, high in sugar. So, and again, they top it again with streusel and more sugar icing. So it's just sugar on top of sugar, and bakery and pastries to be made with real natural butter. They don't even make it with margarine, which has tons of trans fat in it. You shouldn't eat it, but they're making it with this. They call it, it's a bakery fat that they use, that I used to see out there, and they sell it by the tons of it, and they just use it. If you go into one of those bakeries, you won't see butter. It'll be imitation butter flavoring, and you're going to see bales, tons of it, just bales and bales of tons of this processed fat that they take and they whip up, and they use it for the icing for your cakes. They use it for the Danish when they bake them, that needs that to keep it moist, and again, all the artificial flavors and preservatives go in that pastry so it lasts long and stays moist.
Well, one thing on that too is I think people just need to be realistic when you're thinking about these things. The reason why they exist is just going back to the volume. Like, there's just only so much butter available. You know what I mean? So I think that's something else I was just really funny with thinking about these things is like, because we're eating so much so quickly, like that's why there's just not enough butter available. They literally can't make the butter fast enough. So it's not like these synthetic things are only created as a cost-cutting measure. It's because it's the only way to meet this massive demand. And so just something for us to keep in mind and self-checking on this stuff, you know what I mean, is like if you eat a lot of different of these like pre-made pastries, like anything from Little Debbie's, for example, like that's why they're made the way they are. It's not just a profit driver. It's because, you know, it's only so much resources available to make that type of food.
Correct. And I've seen these buttercreams. When you're in Europe, the buttercream is sugar that goes into egg whites, and they put it on a water bath and naturally melt it. And then they whip it once it gets warm, and they put fresh cold butter in it, and it whips up to a nice natural buttercream. In the United States, they throw something called Sweetex. It's like a baking fat, and they whip it up. So they'll throw 10 pounds in there, and then they'll throw another 4 pounds of margarine and just a couple pounds of butter. If they're more of a natural bakery, they'll throw a little butter to give that buttery flavor to it. But most of them won't. It's just all the Sweetex and a little margarine if they want that buttery flavor, imitation, you know, the trans fat. And they just whip that up, and they put, for, let's just say 15 pounds of all that fat, they'll put 30 pounds of powdered sugar in there. And that's what you eat on your cakes. So when people are like, oh, this frosting, they're eating all that frosting on the cake, and then the cake is made with seed oil. So it's just something that's not good for you. And who's doing this? So when you get these pre-made cakes, for birthday cakes, you know, the sweet snack cakes and everything, you're in a rush. You know, you didn't have the time to eat breakfast. So you get that with your coffee or your milk. The kids drink with milk in the morning, and it's always been a snack in the middle of the table. It's just easy for you to grab and eat. You go to the office, people bring them to the office, and they put them up there, and they share them with you, and or if they have a potluck, and every time they bring something, they bring these snacks, because people don't cook. And this is what feeds America. And we have to ask ourselves why. You know, put it on put a list in your office. Things not to bring. These are the things that you should bring. Make it a change. I noticed that, especially for kids, they're not always going to grab a piece of whole fruit and eat an apple. But if you cut it, take the core out, put it in slices, and you leave it on the table. You clean the orange rind off, and you slice it or cut it into wedges. The kids are going to come and eat it. It's just naturally. You're helping them. It's not the old days, but the parents say, hey, clean that fruit, and you're eating it. You're not getting anything else. That's how it was in the old days. You thought about 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s. Hey, if you don't eat what's on your plate, you're not eating. And parents now they're going to stop at McDonald's, they're going to stop off at Cane's, and they're going to stop off at 3 fast food because my kid wants this, he won't eat that. And that's what they're dictating. The kids are dictating what they eat nowadays, and they shouldn't. You know, the old way was, well, if you don't eat, well, then you're not going to eat. So we have to change this. And it's not to hurt the kids or say you can't have that, but it's to help them stay healthy, live longer. Sugary foods. Again, we talked about breakfast cereals, frosted cereals, chocolate cereals, marshmallows in the cereals. They have more sugar than half the desserts out there. So again, it's just easy to buy a couple boxes of cereal, put it there on top of the refrigerator on the side of the cupboard, and the kids get up, mom and dad are already at work, or the parents was like, I'm running to work, I'm getting ready, just pour your box of cereal. So this is the way we are living, and these are the items of the ultra processed foods that we have to take out of our diets and tell our kids we're not doing cereal anymore. I'll make you even some toast, even though bread isn't the best thing for you, but it's taken away, and little by little giving them options. Fruit salad in the morning was great. You know, if eggs take what 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes to make, it's not that difficult. We're making it difficult. Frozen dinners, microwavable foods. You know, that's another big one now. I mean, the frozen food section is huge, and it gets bigger and bigger every year. You know, TV dinners really came out in, I think, the 60s and 70s, and that was a great thing. Everyone loved them. I mean, you were able to get your turkey dinner, your Salisbury steak, a fruit cup, you know, and that's been going on for years, but I think it got bigger and bigger. So now all the corporations, so if you see Marine calendars out there, or you see Buffalo Wild Wings or P.F. Chang's, now they have their own lines. So you see these brand names versus the off-brand. The off-brand, you would look, I'm not going to eat that. But now you're like, oh, wow, this came from this restaurant. So the marketing behind that also pushes these ultra-processed foods. So people are saying, well, at least I'm not going there. I can fill up my freezer with all these foods. And people buy these big, giant ground freezers, and they just stack it. So when they can't get home, well, kids, you have there. And they have chicken wings in there. They have the egg rolls. They have the stir fries. They have the fried rice. They have everything you want. They even have your, your Olive Garden Alfredo.
Yeah.
It's just too easy. And we have to rethink the way we're eating. Again, it comes back down to education.
If I can pop in, I think part of it is just making that mental separation, because it's funny, I actually never thought about it that way until you said it. Because like when growing up, like we did have TV dinners. It was more of like a treat, because like I liked Salisbury steak mostly because I didn't know what it was, but like TV dinners were a thing, but we knew they were like lower quality, because like I said, I grew up in a family where we ate dinner together every night. It might not have always been like a big thing, but there was always like a protein, a carb, or starch, or whatever. But I bring it up because like it's funny now where it's like, yeah, for a while, I don't anymore, but it's like there were mozzarella sticks or jalapeno poppers or something in the fridge, but I never associated the fact, or even chicken nuggets, right? Like I'm sure everybody keeps chicken, some form of chicken and frozen breaded chicken in their fridge, especially with air fryers, because you're like, well, it's chicken and whole chicken breast, and I'm putting it in the air fryer, so I'm not frying it. And it's like, okay, but it's still not as good than just taking the time. In fact, one thing I did the other day, and this is a little bit of a brag for me, because I've been using ChatGPT to make food. I figured out how to make biscuits and gravy from scratch in 45 minutes. And I was like, I can't believe it was that easy this whole time. I'm sitting here frying up some chicken tenders, in 10 minutes, when I could have literally, I guess it's not the best meal, right? But I guess the point I'm making is you don't associate that all these frozen foods are literally just an evolution of TV dinner. So I think that's something that's just a really important connection to make, is like you said, like snacking on mozzarella sticks is still just as bad as the restaurant, even though they're not cooking them the same way,
And when you bring up chicken fried steak and even eggs Benedict, which I can't stand when you go out to eat. And a lot of the eggs, again, are pasteurized. You have to find out if that restaurant is not having pasteurized eggs or not. But when they make these sauces, it's a powder that they dip into milk, and they mix it sometimes water to make it cheaper. The holidays too, they mix it into water, and it's the most horrible holidays I've ever tasted. So when you're at home, the old Southern way, you'd grab the bacon grease, the sausage grease, and you'd chop up the leftover sausage and bacon or whatever you had, the scraps, ham, whatever it was, and you mix that in with the milk, and you thicken it up with a butter roux, and you made your fresh biscuits. And it was delicious, delicious for a reason, because all that fat. But again, it wasn't a can. They have canned biscuits and gravy. They have the canned biscuit mix. The package where you just mix the water. So they have all these other substitutes. So you're not even really eating great from scratch food. And you think wow, this place has biscuits, gravy. How many times have I gone to a place with breakfast and I have to ask them, is your corned beef hash made from scratch?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll lie to you. And when it comes out, you know that there's little tiny dices of potato, and that corned beef was from a can. So you have to look for those restaurants that actually make fresh corned beef hash. And even though it's still filled with nitrates, it's not the thing for you to eat, but at least you know you're not getting it from a can or a freezer. So if you like those kind of things, make the little changes one day at a time. Okay, and it's like, we're not asking you to change it all at once, because it's not going to happen, but you can make that change. Packaged chips, cheese snacks. Now, if you looked at the calories, you're looking at the average for per serving is like 170 calories. And I'm not taking per bag, I'm taking per serving. And these kids are eating 1 or 2 bags, or the parents will buy 4 or 5 bags and put them in the cupboard, and the kids are on top of the refrigerator, and the kids are just grabbing them. The hot Cheetos, which that's another topic with all that spicy food that's damaging the insides of your guts and your stomach. But potato chips, cheese puffs, flavored tortilla chips, when you think about it, the refined fry oils, the salt, the flavorings that they're putting in this, there's an abundance of it, almost absolutely no nutritional value. But on top of that, it's not just one seed oil. They're mixing the seed oils. It's up to 3-4 different seed oils. These chips are bad for these kids. And that's just, they're walking around, they go to 7-Eleven or one of these liquor stores, and they buy their chips and they buy their soda. So you're drinking fructose, eating seed oils, and every artificial flavor and salt for you. So when you just keep eating them, because the salt keeps telling you, the sodium just basically says, well, I got to have more. And then on top of that, I'm getting thirstier. That's why they used to put salted beer nuts on the bars, because this way the drunks could just keep drinking more. So these are things that we're not taking a look at, saying, how do we reduce this? Have you ever gone down to a supermarket? Not only do they have the smaller bags as you check out, sometimes right behind the checkout station, they'll have a section with their special of chips. But when you go down the aisle with potato chips, it just goes from the beginning all the way to the end. When most of them say, okay, here's a little section of coffee, then here's a little section of tea, then here's a little section of this. And now chips is one whole roll. Yeah. And you can get everything from popcorn, pretzels, corn chips, the Frito-Lay chips, to the all natural ones that they want to sell to you. So, and then they combo it up when you go to get a sandwich and you think you're eating healthy. Well, I'm going to get the combo. I'm going to get the chips. So everywhere you go, here's a bag of chips.
I think it's important to remember too, like, the food industry has a 30 or 40-year head start at this point, where they already mastered the psychology between how people think and then like how your taste buds work, kind of like you said. Because I was just thinking about the fact that you ever notice that the chips are always right across from the soda, because like you said, you have the salty sweet, which is just a natural thing that mixes for people. And like the entire grocery store is built on psychology, right? Like the milk is in the back corner for a reason, because getting all your essential staples, you have to walk by everything to get there. Like, this is all very well constructed, because I think part of our message here should just be too, like, it's about moderation, right? Like, I still like spicy pickle chips from Miss Vicky's, even though I know, but they're kind of expensive too. So like, I rarely eat them, but I'll definitely have them with like a Coke. And I know Coke isn't great, but like, I still like the taste of Coke. So it's something that I don't really want to get. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I think we just need to, like, people need to be mindful of the fact of, like, to your point, they do this on purpose. Like, they know what they're doing. They know how to pair this stuff. So I think being in mind of it, it's not feeling like you're trapped. It's just more about being mindful about, everything in moderation is okay. But that's where it's also hard, where like you said, you think you're eating healthy. I mean, I was a swimmer for 15, 16 years. We ate all the, I'm sure a lot of kid athletes do, but I just know everyone I was around all the time, they take us to buffets, because we just keep eating nonstop. Like, never mind the fact that the food psychology, like, also just kids that work out all the time do that. But I just remember we used to think, like, oh, we got turkey subs and they're healthy. And it's like, no, like, this whole stuff, when you go to Publix and you get a turkey sub, there's a whole psychology built around that. Not only for you to think that it's healthy, but to think that the things you're pairing with it are healthy too. It's like, oh, well, I'm eating fat-free potato chips. So that's yeah, or because it's baked. And of course, it is a very big convenience thing, right? Like, when you're out at a swim meet or you're on the road, like, that is something to kind of take into account. But I guess the point I just wanted to get out there too is just remember, like, there's decades of food psychology built into this stuff. So I hope people don't feel trapped. It's just something we have to be mindful of when we're eating in moderation and indulging,
But they are trapped and they don't know it. And that's what it comes down to. So you're at a school, a college, middle school. I don't think elementary has vending machines. I never seen them, but if they do, they do. Workplace. So when you're not home, you're in the workplace or you're at school. Even at the gym, I've seen plenty of gyms that have vending machines with energy drinks, and they're not healthy, and chips. I even seen Cheetos the other day and Doritos in a vending machine at a gym. But these vending machines are filled with candy and potato chips and Coca-Cola. Now they'll add the water there for those people that want the water, but what's outselling them? And here's what I know, because working for a big corporation, they own vending companies. And whoever, like if it's the gym or if it's the corporate company, let's just say it's Google that has vending machines, or Intuit, or any of these big giant corporations, because every company, even when they don't have a cafe or a dining center, they have vending machines, tons of them. So the company gets a kickback, usually about 10% back. Especially the big giant colleges, they'll get 15% back on all the vending sales. Then the guy that fills the vending machine, he gets a commission. So everyone's getting commission for what? To push those vending items. It's huge. It's not going away. They would love it to go away, but it's too big of a business. So, and it's all filled with junk food, processed foods. So again, we're not moving away from it. And then I was at the airport the other day, and guess what was in front of me right when I walked in? A vending machine with White Castle.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, we're looking towards AI and future technology. You have these vending machines for pizza. So we're going to be pushing it more. Well, we're not walking away from it, trying to say, here's a vending machine with fruit. Now, I've seen them in the airport with fruit and yogurt, but no one's going over there and buying them. Not as much, or the salads.
I think the bigger part of that is the people that take the time to plan their food out a little bit. Those are the ones I think that you're kind of hitting on that will be better off long term, because like I'm working with a client who ran vending machines. Like I said, he had healthy vending machines, and they were much healthier than your other vending options. They have ways of doing it, but all of that is irrelevant, because all of it is worse than actually leaving the location you're at to go to the food. It's 100% convenience. And we all know that's something that's really built into American culture. But I think that's something that people are becoming more mindful of, is like we said, like kind of not like necessarily planning your meals. I know not all of us want to have, like, we don't want a meal plan 4 days out, right? I know some people do. It's super efficient, good for them. But I think that's kind of the bigger thing, because when you think about vending machines, if you're buying from a vending machine, it's honestly because it's an impulse buy, right? And what's crazy is an impulse buy has gone from 50 cents to now something that's $3. It's an impulse buy. That's pretty crazy in and of itself. But I think that also kind of just shows you the direction of, like, people need to be mindful when they're thinking about these processed foods about, like, am I picking convenience way too often over like long-term health?
But they're not, but see, even with the healthy ones, they're not looking at the back. When you thought about it, remember Naked Juice and what happened to them? I don't even know if they even exist anymore. I don't see them anywhere.
They do, but
it's rare. They're not buying them as much. Most of the corporation, they lost a big chunk of that business. When you think about Triscuits, whole wheat biscuits. Oh, I'm eating these whole wheat instead of the wheat thins, instead of the Cheez-Its. But you look at the back of the box and the seed oils and all the sodium and the high amounts of sugar in those. They weren't healthy. So again, it's counting and looking at the ingredients and counting the calories and seeing what's in that to verify. Just don't think because they put healthy and they put a little green leaf on there that it is healthy. Look it up first, because there's as we talked about, food fraud and manipulation out there. There's tons of that out there, so be careful.
If I could add on to that real quick, the thing that you taught me that's really come into play, I think I've mentioned this before, when you're looking at those ingredients, it does really tell you a lot, because like I like Lux, for example, for like bagels. And what's funny is, like, I'm super picky now because I know there's only 2 or 3 brands that I can trust, because even when it says wild caught salmon on the package, if I look at the food label and it says color from food, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't want that. So what kind of sucks is, like, you do have to investigate these labels a little bit more. And it's not something as simple as like, oh, I just don't recognize any of these ingredients. Like xanthan gum, I now realize isn't, or guar gum, I think it was, guar gum is not necessarily super bad, right? So like, and part of this is because I saw the other day where they said the ingredients list obviously are astronomical now, but like, you really can learn a lot about what you're putting into your body, and just being more mindful of better options, whether you're at a vending machine or a grocery store. It really only takes a couple of seconds, and over time, it's kind of like anybody here who's ever weighed their macros. You know, you start to understand what 8 ounces of chicken feels like because you've picked up so many 8 ounces of chicken. I feel like it's the same thing with food labels now, where like even my fiance who works in the medical field knows all those big fancier words better than I do. But she's asking me because I'm so used to just looking at ingredients and I just recognize things that I've looked up. So it's like, okay, cool. Like not just as an assured ingredients list, but like, do I recognize what this is and what it does? Like, you know, it's something you pick up over a course of a couple of months if you do it consistently. It's not like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to Google my food forever. So
yeah, when after I look at 3 or 4 ingredients, unless it's spices like garlic, salt, or onion powder and chili powder or something like that, then I start questioning what's in there, and I won't buy it. Another thing is candy and how it's changed. And for years, let's not say years, decades, people have been buying gummy bears, and all this gummy candy. None of that is good for you. The hard candy is just as bad. I mean, in the old days, they just boiled the water or glucose and just a lot of times it was just sugar, and they put a little artificial flavor or artificial coloring, which is bad for you. That's the worst part about it. But in old days, it was more natural. I mean, if they would just make sugar and water and boil it to a crack point, and you didn't have the artificial flavors and none of the colors and just left it white, all natural, ate it that way, that's a lot better for you. But now they're not going to do that because it's not marketable and it's not sellable. Chocolate bars with numerous additives in it. I mean, in the old days, it was just plain piece of natural chocolate they would get from, the cocoa bean. White chocolate is not real chocolate. Stop calling it chocolate. It's probably one of the worst things for you. But now, I mean, it's like, I remember tasting a candy bar, whether it was Kit Kat, Snickers, Babe Ruth in the old days versus now, and none of it tastes the same. And I bet you a lot of Americans that grew up in the old days, they know that. Not only they're shrunken, they're smaller, but the ingredients completely change. Even a Reese's peanut butter cup, if you look those up. So,
if I could jump in, my favorite story about this is our dog found a sleeve of Oreos one time after a trip, and I freaked out because obviously dogs can't have chocolate, right? And I mean, she ate like, we're talking 6 or 7 Oreos, which for a dog is a lot. Like that should have killed her. And we freak out and we call the poison hotline or whatever. There's one for pets. And they go, well, how many Oreos did she eat? We're like, oh, like 6 or 7. How much does she weigh? We give her the weight, tell the type of dog, all this other stuff. They go, oh, she'll be fine. We're like, well, are you sure? Like we read online, chocolate's bad. And they go, oh yeah, there's like no chocolate in an Oreo. And we're like, what? And they go, no, yeah, it's like, did you not notice from the texture? Like it's not chocolatey or anything. Like it's to the point now where like, I'm not saying you should let your animals just eat this kind of stuff, obviously, but it was one of those moments where like, we were fortunate that it's not real chocolate, but also, holy crap, we were eating that and not really realizing what it was, kind of thing.
Oreos, and I remember in the 80s growing up, were a big thing. Everyone took Oreos to school, and if you're at home, you're dipping them in milk. It was a popular thing. But I watched many dog owners hand their dogs Chips Ahoy cookies and Oreos. That was been going on for decades. And I've never seen the dogs get sick. They just chomped it up. Obviously, all that sugar wasn't good for them. I mean, if you want your dog to live longer, you wouldn't put that in front of a dog. Again, so when it comes down to number 8 of ultra processed foods, obviously fast food. You could see your health changing right away if you stopped eating it. I think that's a way of life for a lot of people. It's just easier and it's cheaper. But again, they're showing at the airport, some guy went in and he paid $24 to $28. I believe it was it was Burger King at one of the airports. It was, for whether it's a Whopper, double Whopper with cheese and a drink and, the fries, it's up to $28. And that's not affordable. But for most places, you're paying about $15, $16 for a combo meal. So I don't know how long that's going to last for people. I know that they're walking away from some of the fast food. I don't see, when I drive by a McDonald's, I don't see the lines that I used to see in the old days. That you could never, come lunch and breakfast and dinner, they were around the block. You would have to wait a half an hour to get your food. I think that's dying. You see it. They're losing a lot of money because of how much it costs, because they know they can go somewhere else and get some better food right around the same price. So you probably can get a roasted chicken for $9 versus and feed 2 to 4 people, whether that roasted chicken just isn't as good for you as all, but they're not spending that kind of money. But French fries, fried chicken, breaded fish sandwiches, that fish isn't real fish. Onion rings, often cooked repeatedly, not only in the refined oils, but they're sitting under that heat lamp, saturating in the fat. And all those products are they're all oxidation products, basically. So they're not good for you to eat. All that food, I can't tell you what's in that meat. You have to go and ask them, get those ingredients and put it down on a list, but it's not real meat. You got to ask yourself what you're putting into your body when it comes down to those chicken nuggets, those chicken tenders. What's in the flour. You hear all this stuff about what do you call it? Chick-fil-A. People call it chick-fil-A, chick-fil-A. But you hear that there's up to 20 ingredients into their sauces, 20 ingredients for that chicken sandwich, into their breading. Only they know what's in it. You hear all these stories about it. I don't have an ingredient list, so I can't tell you, but it can't be good for you. I won't go to those places anymore. The kids, when they were growing up, they loved that stuff, and you would buy them once in a while. Growing up, McDonald's was a treat for us. We were lucky if we had it once a month, once every 3 months. That was a treat in the 70s and 80s. Not no more. It's a way of life, and that's why, again, you see this obesity. And again, it used to be the affordable food. It isn't anymore.
Well, I think one thing to point out too that's crazy that's happened with food is that the floor keeps going up. Like during COVID, it kind of got to the point where groceries were so expensive. Like I remember talking to a foodie influencer friend of mine, and he's like, it's actually just cheaper to go out to eat. Like even McDonald's and stuff like that at the time, it was cheaper when you looked at your grocery bill just to go out and buy fast food. But then fast food caught up. You went from like $6, $7, $8 burgers to now everything costs just as much as Five Guys. You're looking at like a $10, $12 burger. And so that's, I think, the other thing we have to be mindful of is that, like, that floor, it's not really that low anymore. It's not like it's not really cheaper to go to the grocery store just to make a burger. It's not really cheaper just to go to McDonald's anymore, in reference of like how we all grew up. So I'm just throwing out there as like, I think that's something that we're noticing is like McDonald's has gotten back. I'm using them, I'm picking on them, but like really it's all fast food has gotten to the point now where it actually is back to being a lot more expensive. Like it kills me to pay like $3 for a tiny little taco, like that's, even when it's like the cheaper cuts of meat, it's like, in fact, there's a place near me that charges more money for beef cheek than it does for carne asada, which I find really confusing because, maybe I'm wrong on that, but the point I'm just trying to make is I think people just need to be aware that like that floor it hasn't come down yet. It still keeps going up and up and up. And all likelihood, it's going to be like the cost of milk. It's not going to come down.
You're 100% right. I go shopping for myself and to get myself a steak or chicken, whatever it is. And if I'm going to make a certain dish, you get a couple tomatillos or tomatoes, whatever I'm going to put in mushrooms, if I'm going to make a chicken marsala. But by the time I get all those ingredients to make that dish, or to get the rice pilaf, or if I'm going to make mashed potatoes, I'm out the door at $65, $80.
Yep.
And again, that would be for 2 or 3 maybe people. Sometimes it's even higher, goes up to 100. But even for myself, just to try to make myself a single steak with a baked potato or something, I'm still at $30, $35. So you're right. It's good for me. It's easier for me and better for me to go into, an Italian restaurant and order chicken marsala there because I can still get it for $28. And I don't have to wash the dishes and spend money on water, electricity, and soap. So it just does. It's not adding up anymore. It just. What do you do? Because there's no way to go about it. You go to the restaurant, you're going to pay higher prices. You're going to pay the taxes on the food that you're buying. You're going to pay for the gratuity. Now they're adding a cost of living or the credit card charges on there. And if you're not, you're going to the fast food restaurant and you can't eat that processed food every day, but you're still paying a premium price for fast food. So number 9 of processed things you shouldn't be eating are the processed cheeses. And I mean, you and I have talked about this many times, European cheese, because in Europe, there is no, what do you call it? What is the law? Pasteurization law. So the cheeses are not pasteurized. Out here, the cheeses are fake. when you're thinking about Velveeta or the processed cheese slices, a lot of times, again, fast food, processed cheese slices. Kids, mom and dad are making them grilled cheese with processed cheese slices. Okay. So you're thinking about this, cheese spreads. A lot of people love these cheese spreads. They put it all over everything. Self-stable cheese dips. They contain emulsifiers, added sodium, and no real actual cheese to them, cheese flavoring.
Or microbial enzymes. Or is that what they call it? The mushroom enzyme?
Correct.
Yeah. And just good.
When you go to a Subway, a lot of it's processed cheese. Hardly anybody asks for provolone, but I don't know. Do they even carry provolone? If they do, it's very thinly sliced and they cut it in half. And you get half, so you have to ask yourself what you're eating when you're going somewhere. And they say, okay, we're going to put cheddar cheese on your burger. It's not cheddar cheese, it's processed cheese.
Well, and just to throw it out there too, like, I think there are certain things people should think about where it is worth spending a little extra money. Like for me, like I buy Manchego and Parmigiano Reggiano at Costco, and I know it's not super cheap, but I'm also not eating like tons of slices of it. And you can tell with the cheese, I mean, you can still buy like good cheeses from Boar's Head. It's just more expensive that way because it's in smaller quantities. But I bring it up because it's just kind of insane to see the difference in cheeses with the American cheeses, which, they're still good. They're just not the same level of quality. Like, eating real feta, and I say this too, because for anyone out there that's lactose, they might not realize that not only is Parmigiano Reggiano and Pecorino high in protein, but they actually have a low lactose content in them. So people that are, very sensitive to dairy, like real cheeses are actually, they're not just better for you for whatever different reasons of how they're made in Europe. In a lot of ways, they put a lot of less stress on your digestive system than a lot of the processed foods that we eat.
100%. And one thing I failed to mention was that you don't buy the Kraft cheese or those cheese in the containers, in the Italian section with the pasta and everything. Those are the worst for you. And stay away from bagged cheese. The cheeses that are pre-grated, they have wood pulp in it. Yeah, and they have starch in it. So they have different things. So if you ever notice that when you get the cheese, it doesn't melt in your hands. When you freshly grate cheese, it would melt and stick, especially if it gets hot. When you put it in your car, when you go home, it's not melted. It kind of falls apart. It's because of the food starch. And again, it's all fake cheese, and they're doing everything to keep it longer, to preserve it, and for you to use it at home. And it's the worst thing for you. So if anything, when uncertain, buy the cheese that you can grade. The Manchego is fine, the Parmesan, especially if it's imported. Don't buy the domestic stuff. At least look at the different types of cheeses you can.
And just to throw out there too, just because we mentioned food fraud, is definitely check where your cheese is from. I say that because like Bellicoso, I like their mozzarella, but they're the biggest offenders when it comes to like, oh yeah, you're buying Parmesan and you think you're buying the real Parmesan, but if you look at the back, it's like made in Wisconsin. So just throwing that there with food fraud. Like I know there's a lot of food fraud out there, but cheese for me was one of the biggest offenders that like, when I did start picking, it's like picking good wines, right? Like the most expensive wine isn't the best wine and the cheapest wine isn't the best wine. There's one that's like kind of on the lower end of the middle that's like actually the right quality. So just out there, because I love cheese, so I love bringing it up to people. Like just being mindful of the food fraud that's out, or the cheese fraud that's out there.
Correct. And you see, the thing is with that, just because you hear Wisconsin has the best cheese doesn't mean it's not a processed cheese. Okay. Yeah. I look at the smaller cheese farms, like in the Bay Area, Cowgirl Creamery. There's a lot of cheese farms across the United States, smaller ones that are fantastic, all natural, organic products, and they care about it. If you go to their websites, you can find all the information, all the ingredients, how they process it. You can go down there, they'll give you a tour. Great cheeses out there. So this is a downer to say don't eat cheese. No, just don't eat processed cheese. Look at the types of ingredients on them and be careful in your selections. Number 10, artificially flavored snacks and drinks. So again, it comes down to your fruit snacks. Everyone thinks it's healthy. Every mother is putting into their elementary kids' lunchbox fruit snacks. They're putting all kinds of, for the longest time, Capri Suns. They put in the 80s, Even the schools were giving out the little tiny fruit juices. What was it, fruit punch? It was purple and pink and orange. Worst things for you. And those were the colored mixed drinks that you always received. So there's so many of them out there, and you would go to Costco and buy the cases of the Capri Suns and the other fresh fruit flavored, all natural, it says, but it was the worst thing for you. They're very high in sugar and artificial ingredients, and very little fruit, if any. So it's all fruit flavoring. So these are the top 10 that if you start working down a list to get these things out of your list of ingredients in your pantry, you're going to do a lot better. You're going to feel better. Your kids are going to feel better. And it's one step at a time. And we have to make these choices. We have to stop it. And our kids are saying, well, we can't eat this anymore. Listen, you take away the Capri Sun, the kids sooner or later are not going to miss it. There's fun things you could do with watermelon by putting it in a blender and putting a little fresh sugar and a lime juice in it and giving them a watermelon alba fresca. You can get the pineapples and take out the core and the skin, obviously, and blend it and put a little fresh squeezed orange juice in it. There's no harm in squeezing juices if you find a juice processor, but most people just don't want to wash it afterwards because, again, they just want to take it out of the container. I make fresh squeezed orange juice, lemonade all the time. You know, I squeeze the lemons, mix a little sugar. I'll boil the sugar sometimes with water and mix it in. My trees have pomegranates in it. I take them out, squeeze some pomegranates in it, and I have pomegranate lemonade. It's not that hard. And it's one step at a time to make your own stuff, and you're going to feel proud of it. You just buy some glass containers, not putting them in plastic, and you put them in your refrigerator. And I'm telling you, every time I make the fresh, different flavors of lemonade, if I'm at my home in California, the kids just grab it, and it's gone in a day. So I always make sure I make a little backup squeeze juice and I'm ready to pour into the next one. So again, if you can find natural squeezed lemon juice somewhere or lime juice somewhere, not the concentrate stuff, you could actually buy that stuff and just mix that in with sugar and water. Or actually get some mineral water and pour a little mineral water in it to give it a little seltzer. So these are the things you can do, you know, limiting these ingredients. Look at the labels, look for fructose and corn syrup, food dyes, you know, processed oils. Just these little ingredients right there alone are going to help you get away from this. Excess sodium. Salt is good for you. Don't let them fool you. Or they tell you salt is bad for you. But you have to look at what types of salt you're buying. Where is it coming from? And people don't think. For a while, everyone was saying pink sea salt is great for you. And it wasn't. Sea salt is great for you. It wasn't. You have to look at where you're buying your salt. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from the infested waters with mercury, where people are digging and dropping computers into the ocean? So you have to look at where the salt is mining at. Again, artificial sweeteners, really bad for you. And everyone thinks, well, I'm not eating sugar, so this is better for me. I'm going to use the Sweet and Low and the Splenda and everything else. And you're finding out later on this stuff has aspartame and everything else that's bad for you. So again, there's a long list of preservatives and flavor enhancers out there. You have to look for those on the back. If it's in artificially flavored and it's enhanced or it's an emulsified, get away from it. I don't know if you have any other comments to this and, you know, how bad these things are harmful to you and your body, but this has been changing America for some decades now.
I think the big thing, so I know you had another section on better alternatives, so I just want to throw those out there because I'll run through them real quick just so people can hear what those are, but I do want to talk a little bit about my experience because I actually have another thing I want to add on to what you're talking about with the ingredients where we were talking about limiting, but better alternatives would be fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains. It's stuff a lot of people talk about, but worth listing out. So eggs, beans and lentils, wild caught fish, fresh poultry, lean meats, nuts and seeds, plain yogurt, homemade soup, sauces and dressing, extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. All these things have become easier with things like Instapots, crock pots, all that kind of stuff. I say that because I'm on this journey myself. And as I said, I'm trying to eat more protein, more fiber. But as someone that is experimenting with less healthy foods, right? Like, to be honest, I made chicken fried steak because we had cube steak that was going to go bad. I'm making sauerkraut right now, not because I was ambitious enough to do it, but like I had way too much cabbage left and I was worried about throwing it out because cabbage isn't as cheap as it used to be. But on top of that, I also noticed that there are things available when you're making things that weren't available before that are still fairly healthy to use. I say that because like The one sitting in my head, I think, is xanthan gum. I was watching a video where a guy made milkshake with xanthan gum and using it as a stabilizer. And the other thing is I tried to make my own honey mustard one time, and I just used honey and I just used mustard. And the thing is, you need something, and I don't know much about the food chemistry, but to bind it together. So xanthan gum is one of the recommended things to kind of, and it's not a lot of it. So what's funny is like you can use some of these ingredients that you do find in your stuff without having to do all the additives that you're talking about, that basically you're avoiding the shelf stabilizers, right? Like if it's worth making, it's worth eating. But if it's not worth making, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, is it how worth it is it to eat this? And I say that because for me, I've had issues with cholesterol, my triglycerides, all this stuff, because I went from a super healthy lifestyle to a super sedentary lifestyle. And working out and being stressed out, like just eating better and working out isn't always enough. But the thing that I'm really leaning into is realizing like the lack of fiber. So eating more beans, more fruits, more veggies, all stuff that have fiber. So like it's not that carbs are bad, but when I'm eating bread, like, is there fiber in there? Like you find yourself finding a lot of these alternatives. So what's kind of nice is, like I said, like, yes, it's kind of crazy how manipulated we are, but we do, for people that want to take the time, and I think we should all do that, like we do have access to better things, and we can do some of these things at home, some of this prep to minimize whether or not you need to grab food when you're out. Like I know it's disgusting, but I'm a sucker for a steak, egg, and cheese bagel from McDonald's. I know they're gross, but to be honest, like it's just a little happy treat. But like I almost never get them, right? It's more like if I'm traveling on the road. But my point being is like I'm not motivated to make that at home, right? Like I eat healthier at home now. I eat eggs. I eat, like I said, just things in the morning like that. So I just wanted to share that part to say that, like, I know it's easy to say that with the better alternatives, but I really do believe that when you eat these more nutritious foods, you're fuller, longer, and you feel better. So, like I said, I don't believe in getting rid of processed foods completely, mostly because I like to eat them. But I do think that a lot of us do need to take that refocus because we've allowed ourselves to be manipulated in a certain way. So, like I said, even if you want to make some of those cheap things at home, like, you know, I say that because I was walking through the aisle yesterday where the baking stuff wasn't. It wasn't just xanthan gum. There were like 50 different things in there that I would never use, but I see them on the back of packages and I'm like, oh, you know, like I said, even with a milkshake, like you can, it's pretty easy to make a milkshake at home. The appliances are around. They're actually pretty affordable, you know, and it's not about saving money. It's just, you know, who doesn't want a better quality milkshake?
No, but you don't want to wash the blender afterwards or the milkshake mixer. So yeah. What it comes down to, find a cheat day once a week. Then you go to McDonald's, get your bagel. But if you can just not buy those ingredients that I was just talking about. Yeah. Move away from those. One cheat day, listen, I get it. You know, if you want Taco Bell or Burger King or any of those, just maybe it's once a month, once every 2 weeks. You can cheat on your diet and have apple pie on Saturday, every Saturday. Oh, forget the weekends. That's the day to eat out. But start making those changes, because the inflammation every day consuming those products, that's where your stomach starts to grow and you're bloated and you're exhausted. You're tired. Your brain can't even think straight. And people don't realize this. They think I think straight. I work fine. People love me at work. You're missing the point. And could you be doing better? As long as you get your 8 hours of sleep, you sleep well, you eat well, you're going to feel better, you're going to do better. People think, well, I go to the gym every day. Don't tell me I'm healthy, I'm strong. I don't care what you're doing. 80% of what you do is about eating, what you put into your body. You can work every single day. You can work out every day. Doesn't matter. You'll do a lot better. I see people go to the gym for a year, 2 years straight. I see them all the time. And then after a year, I look at them and I'm like, you've gained weight. You didn't lose weight. You might be stronger. You might be able to run 2 miles instead of the one that you were doing before at a faster pace, but you didn't lose weight. You don't look healthier. It's what you eat. It's what you're putting in your body. And again, processed food is not eating. You're not eating. You're not doing anything good to yourself. You know, your lymph nodes, you know, everything from your neck to your inside, your guts, your kidneys, especially your liver. Now, the liver health heals itself, but not if you're killing it every single day.
Well, actually, and one thing I forgot to add to what you're saying, that's a perfect example of this. So I've been eating kefir, and the way it was kind of explained is I thought like I was putting these microbes in my stomach and they're going to help me digest. And what I learned is like, no, they're like temporary. And the same thing with yogurt. But what that led me down was learning about the reason why I keep bringing up fiber is kind of to your point too, because it's not even about whether you should keep it minimal, like say once a week or whatever. What you don't realize is like a normal healthy diet actually protects your body. That's why like people that work out, like if you ever listen to The Rock, he works out, he eats super clean, and then he has this day where he's just eating like waffles and pancakes like all day, right? But the point being is like you don't realize, at least I didn't realize, that like things like fiber are these natural things built in to protect your stomach. And I don't even just mean from fast food. Like for anyone that doesn't know, I learned this last year that you should always actually start with like your, I don't know if it's starches, but like you start with your vegetables when you're eating. The reason why you eat your vegetables, then your meat, then your starch, is because the fiber actually protects your stomach even from meat when you're eating. So like your veggies are meant to kind of cooperate with it and give your stomach a better reaction. But at the same time, it's actually protecting your stomach. And obviously starches just kind of digest slower and they're good for you. But the point is like there is a natural order. There's a certain reason why we eat the way we eat. And the way to think about it is that like when you've been eating healthy like that, your stomach, even though greasy food might upset your stomach's actually better equipped because, like I said, if you're eating fiber before you eat a bunch of greasy food, or it's going to be absorbed, is what I'm trying to say. So, like, there are a lot of these natural safeguards built into your food to help you, enjoy things that you want to enjoy.
Well, it helps you burn it, but you also burn it off. It's funny you mentioned The Rock because back in 2007, 2008, I'm not sure which, it was one of those years. So The Rock was on site at Paramount Studios while I was working there, and for 5 days straight, 4 days straight, his meal every day for dinner while he's prepping the set was a New York steak grilled and spaghetti. And that's how he ate, no vegetables, nothing else. So I just assumed that he wanted the protein, the high protein, and the carbs to burn off because he was working out. And that's the only thing I didn't go up to him and ask him why that's what he wanted, but that's what I made for him every day. And, there's all kinds of diets out there. Look them up. Look what's good for you. And there's people that are on keto diets, but the minute they get off of it, boom, they blow up again. So you have to be careful on what is really going on and what's happening, what you're putting in your body, what that diet does for you. There's those people that get what is it called, the lap bands. And I've known a lot of people that died from them, and they get them, and then they could only eat, it looks like finger style foods, just like minor. So you can't even enjoy going to a restaurant with them. I've been out with a lot of people that when they had that surgery, and I'm like, wow, what a miserable way to live. That you can't even eat a whole entree anymore. Now I can barely eat an entree. I usually eat half of entree when I go out. So if I'm out with somebody, it's good to cut it in half for me if they want to eat that. But half the times I just box the other half and take it home, or just order a smaller portion of something. Sometimes I can't even find anything to eat, unless it's pure protein, because I can't eat all that food anymore. I've trained myself to eat less. Now, I've gained more weight over the last couple of years because I've been working in an office and not doing the work that I have been in the past. And, so I know that for myself, I need to change to an all protein diet. And it's good to take a walk after dinner, which most people just lay down, watch TV, you go to bed after dinner. You have to be eating by 2 or 3 o'clock and not eating at 8 or 9 or 7 or 6, which people like to go and have a late dinner because they get off of work at 5 or 6. But then they're eating late and going to sleep when you should eat early dinner. Don't eat anything at the end of the night and take a nice walk every day. That helps with your health process. And these are the education pieces that people need to learn and understand and make those changes. And most people say, I don't have the time. I have kids, I have a husband, I have a wife, I commute. There's everything. Find a way. Find a way.
One thing I want to add, and we'll make sure we get to the front. By the way, we are not doctors or anything like that. We're just people that are super interested in research.
Doctors know nothing about nutrition.
No, I agree. I'm just, for our disclaimer, I'm just letting people know this is not medical advice or anything.
We're going to have he gets a kickback on those pills. So does the husband. So they want to push the pills. They're not going to give you nutritional advice.